So let's get started and talk about Agile in medical hardware design. So let's talk about a typical hardware design process. Now, if you see a typical device design process from both hardware and software perspective involves multiple layers as well as multiple phases which are involved in producing this. So right from conceptualizing a product, creating an idea to feasibility analysis, then thinking about hardware, thinking about the software and thinking about the application. All the way doing the testing and approvals, getting the mandatory approvals and going up to getting the regulatory approvals from FDA and FASI and various other bodies to finally releasing the product for use by the practitioners or maybe a small set of initial users that you want to work upon. So how does this work? So for software and using Agile for software, we are all very familiar with. So in fact, most of the part, like we use Agile in software development, more or less remains the same when you have a typical device production cycle also. So if you see this middle block in this slide that I'm showing you now, the software specification, getting the stacks, writing the development code, this is exactly the same. You can use Scrum for it, you can use Kanban for it. So that more or less remains the same. But the tricky part which comes is, can we make our hardware design faster? Can we look at the hardware design from a different perspective and see how we can solve some of the typical challenges which are faced during this phase? Because maybe software, I can write few lines of code, I can discard them, I can rewrite them. So that is easier. It does not involve a cost, apart from your time cost obviously. But when we talk about a hardware design, we are talking about physical devices, we are talking about boards, we are talking about involving a manufacturing unit to fabricate, assemble and then test those assemblies. So how do we solve the challenge? Because typically if you see, software design might be hardly 3 to 4 months job. But whenever we come out a turnout cycle for hardware, it will last anywhere between 6 months to 1 year. So how do we solve this dilemma and the challenges which are faced during the hardware design? This is even more critical during in the medical devices industry, because for other devices like door sensors, like Wi-Fi routers and so on, they are not as critical. But when we talk about medical hardware, there could be someone's life at risk. So that means quality becomes absolutely paramount and important. So how can we still not compromise with the quality while probably getting faster turnaround time, while still involving some of the end users, customers or market players and make it happen. So let's go to this hardware part and I'll probably zoom out and show you the next slide where we talk purely about hardware. Now if you talk about hardware and you see, so in today's webinar we'll focus on the hardware design and what it entails. So typically it involves three parts. First one is system specification, where we look at the overall system, how do different parts integrate together and what are the items which are available off the shelf, what are the items we need to manufacture. Then comes the mechanical specification where you are fabricating the product, where you are fabricating the actual device, and then comes the brain, basically the PCB board or the electronic circuitry which is required to be able to assemble this. So these are three separate parts of the hardware design. But the most tricky part and the most critical part we'll talk about a little last, which is the board specification, because that involves a lot of hardware, that involves a lot of typically more investment than a mechanical specification or anything else. So we'll talk about this. So first let's go to system specification. So one option when you get into system specification is to think about which components we would take from which are generally available in the market and which components we probably do not have the capability to get it from the market and will manufacture them. So during the feasibility study stage, during the conceptualization stage, the product owner or the product manager would have to work along with the design engineers to think which devices we can use off the shelf. For example, it could be a battery. It could be standard equipment which is available like shock absorbers, for example, like mechanical pulleys, which are available on the shelf, which are more easier to procure. And that's where the design engineers typically would prepare the bill of material, would prepare a system bill of material, that what are the items which need to be purchased from the market. And this is where involves purchase, and this is where we get our first chance to apply some of the practices from the Scrum world and from the Agile world. Because if you see, when you have multiple parties involved, where even the devices which are available in the market, there might be multiple and many. So you might have to iterate through this particular part before you can get the right part or device for your overall system. So that means purchase becomes one of the stakeholders. The manufacturers of these devices become one of the stakeholders. And obviously your end customer or your sales team might also become one of the customers. So your first chance to iterate comes at this level, where you might have a product owner who is looking after the system specification, and he may be taking decisions about which items to prioritize and what is the return on investment that we need, and the costing that we need for each of these devices. And he or she may be talking to multiple stakeholders, as I said, including purchase, including the end customers, manufacturers, and so on and so forth. So, but are you going to deliver something here? Yes, the deliverable at this stage becomes the system bill of material or the overall system specification on which are the devices, which are the different components which are going to be used in the assembly of this. Then let's go to the second part, which is about mechanical specification. Now, if I see from the mechanical specification part of a device, there are basically three parts which are involved. One is designing the complete design of it, or creating a CAD model of the whole design. For example, we are talking about that's an operating table. Okay. Now, how will the operating table look in real? What are the different pulleys and devices and the motors that you can put in? Okay. So that's where again you can iterate through multiple cycles, like we iterate in software. Here you can iterate through multiple CAD designs, working with the end users, working with the, for example, medical industry. You might have certain doctors and surgeons who might actually get involved from a hospital perspective. Okay. So you might be working with them to ensure that the design, the ergonomics, the user interface that we are designing, that is easy and that is what people can look at and understand how this will work. Now, if your device is smaller, maybe like a handheld device or maybe like a scanning machine or something, it might be possible, given the new technologies which have come to the market, for example 3D printing, that you may be able to do a 3D printing for smaller devices, or maybe multiple devices getting 3D printed and then getting assembled together. So this could become more like your prototyping process, which again you can iterate through in case you have some rapid prototyping tools available or the manufacturers or the vendors available. And typically when we involve hardware design, there are those kind of manufacturers who specialize in this rapid prototyping, who may give you a low volume 1 to 3 day turnaround for any of the devices that you are talking about. So that might be something that you might want to look at and see whether we can use some kind of a Kanban specification and also techniques from for example DSDM to look into this feasibility study. Creating certain idea boards where you might have the pros and cons of each different kind of design that you have prepared, and maybe using certain innovation games, for example, where for every design that you have created, the various stakeholders which are involved, they might brainstorm into what is more important in this particular device design, and what are things which we can look at it later. So this is something that you would continuously need to work upon. So that is the second part around mechanical specification. And now let me come to the third part, which will be the board specification. Now this is where the tricky part comes. If you are using your base as a typical standard PCB, okay, primary circuit board, then it is easier because they're available off the shelf, you can use them as you need and so on. But sometimes, in case you want to order a brand new PCB with all the connections, with all the wiring and so on, you might have to give a detailed document to your PCB manufacturer so that they can prepare the board according to its specifications. So depending on what kind of device you are making, for example, if you have to prepare a PCB board from the scratch, you might even want to iterate and use some of the practices from XP and basic OA design to look at how to create the detailed document. Now remember, we are not talking about delivering a potentially shippable increment, but we are talking about a detailed document which will describe how does end product look like. So we are talking iterating at that level. In case you have prototyping boards already available, then I think your life is more easier because you might want to assemble and deassemble the circuitry at multiple levels, show it to the users on how it works, and then be able to specify how it can work. But and the last part that I want to say here during this design part. Now, depending on the components you selected, depending on the functionality that you want to generate, you might want to look at simulations or different simulators which are available. Now, some of these again are available very easily in the market. Some of them come along with the PCB boards and the circuit designers with the specific manufacturers will provide with their components. Or you can simply, there are engineers, there are companies who can help you develop these models in-house also. Now, it depends on which are the specifications that you might choose. Now let's quickly go back to what I just now gave you. If I talk about the complete hardware design, we talk about 4 different parts: system specification, mechanical specification, then the board design, and overall simulation. So in a typical software parallels, think about it as different phases of your development. So when you want to look at your whole system development or the complete device development, you might want to maintain a Kanban board at an overall level, which would show you how your system is progressing. Where are we with respect to the mechanical design? Where are we with respect to the PCB design? And so on and so forth. Even if your product is a little larger or bigger, you might even have product owners for each of these different phases, who might have a team of design engineers, some might have a team of CAD engineers, some might have a team of VLSI and embedded system designers that they might be working on, and they coordinate with each other. So again, you apply the Scrum or Scrum principles to that perspective. And simulation is more like one, you can use it as a prototyping tool. Another, you can also use it as how this device will look after integration, if you can look at that. But to go specific, apart from using Scrum and Kanban and some of the practices from BSD and Dynamic Systems Development Method, you might want to look at some of the Agile practices that I have just now talked about. So for example, while working on the specific design parts, for example, when I talk about system design, looking at and involving purchase into purchasing, you might want to use Scrum and iterate maybe every week or every 2 weeks on how is the work going on. Okay, where are we with respect to purchase? Where are we with respect to different manufacturers? Same you can use at a mechanical specification level, and you can use even at a PCB design level when you are purely in a design stage. Then comes the usage of Kanban. Now Kanban helps you to visualize the whole system. Kanban, in case you're stuck with, for example, the mechanical specification, it will also show you the bottleneck and the lead time which is there. Another important part to understand is to have contract first design. So that means it is important to understand how different parts of your device are going to be intermingling, are going to be face to face, are going to be interacting with in terms of data or simple pulling movements and so on and so forth. And then choose rest of the hardware, choose rest of the specifications according to that. Now typically in a software what we do, we write the code first and then we design the interfaces. Here what we are saying, think about the interfaces first. Just to give an example, let's say we are looking at an operating table. Okay, how many degrees of freedom does it need? Do you want it to move 70 degrees? Do you want to move 360 degrees? Do you want another level of freedom for it, which it can move down and sideways also? That will determine which kind of pulleys do you use. That will determine which kind of ball bearings you use between this. So that becomes part again, which will go into your simulation models for CAD, which will also go into, for example, how we are putting the screws on. That's one. And to take even more examples of this contract first design. For example, you have wireless controller for your operating table, right? How much is the range that you want? Or what kind of specific Wi-Fi settings are required? So should your operating table have a Wi-Fi connection, and how does it work? So those kind of things, if you are able to think first, that makes designing this hardware part more easy. At the same time, because your third-party manufacturers may not always be in business, or the materials might keep on changing, the base materials might be even more better. So the more loose coupling you keep between different applications, the different designs, the different interfaces, the more sustainability that you get. And it is very important that every stage of this hardware design, you are able to think about how do we interoperate. In case, let's say we are sending an operating table to somewhere in Odisha, okay, will we be able to find the parts of that particular capability in manufacture in case my original manufacturer is not working? Okay. So you have to look from that perspective. At the same time, now this is where the next tricky part comes for any designer. Yes, we have a lot of parts that we need to integrate. We have a lot of interfaces that we want to talk about, but you need to develop a level of abstraction. Because for any device you see, it has a nice, sleek looking cover, right? And inside it packs a whole lot of parts. You talk about your internet modem, you talk about a Wi-Fi router, and so on. So how does the user interface look like? How does the actual surface look like? And how many details we can hide there? So it might involve actually some kind of UI UX principles also, as we call it in software. And can we make some of those practices also working according to the Agile philosophy? Yes, we can. Because there again we talk about responding to change over following the plan. We talk about customer collaboration or contract negotiation. So what does the customer actually want? Oh, my operation kit is only that much small. Can this be folded? You will not know it unless you talk to a hospital or a surgeon or a device supplier or the end customers. That is something which is important again from a hardware design perspective also. Now if you are able to do that, yes, in a short term it might feel, oh, how will the hardware work? But if I talk about from a longer perspective, you will see that your devices probably are more sustainable, they are probably more rigorous, they are more user friendly, and they are also more lasting. That means you'll probably be able to put them into market for a longer time and earn those benefits of being a long-term player. Now, these are some of the practices which might use. Now, again, to go into the specific phases of hardware design, you will definitely need a lot of knowledge about how the VLSI systems work, how large-scale embedded systems work. So I would recommend that you read specific books on that particular part. Also, in case you want probably a lightweight version of it, I would advise you to look at some of the work from Joy Justice and the team at Wikispeed, where they have been manufacturing cars using some of these specific techniques that I just now mentioned. And we have been again using these techniques not just in terms of medical hardware design. We have been using for building controllers. We have been using for turbine controllers with a very large, very old manufacturing company. So yes, these practices have been in place, but typically we think, oh, hardware does not mean we can be agile. So this is something that we need to focus on and think what agile philosophy really brings to the picture. Now I think this is where the short session was about the hardware design part of it. There was a question which I saw earlier, that what kind of questions, what kind of SEUs you will get. Yes, you will get about one SEU from this particular webinar. In case you have any more questions, I'm going to leave the field open for next 5 minutes. So in case you have any questions around this, please feel free to ask at this stage. Or you can write to us at the email IDs that are given on the next slide. So in case you have any questions, please write to us, or I'm going to leave the webinar open for next 5 minutes. So in case you have any questions, I would be pretty happy to answer those right now. So please do write your questions in the question bar so that Kunal, you had a question. Would you like to put it in the question part so that we can I can answer that? On the right hand side, you'll find a questions part or chat part. Please, you can put it on the chat part or you can put it on the questions part. So I hope I have not been seeing any questions here. So do keep connected to us through our website agiveta.com/webinars and also our YouTube channel Agiveta. And if you have any questions for me or for the rest of my team, please do feel free to write us on the email address that you see on your screen now. So I hope this, yes, I did get a question, so I will try to answer it. Yes, so Kunal asked, are we conducting more sessions to other domains? Yes, we do regularly conduct those sessions, Kunal, including in BFSI, including in service management and so on. Some of these recordings for these webinars, you can only find it on our YouTube channel with the same name, Agiveta. And in case you guys have a request for any specific field that you would like to hear our experts say, we'll be very happy to conduct some of those specific sessions also. So with this, I would take a Lakshmi. You had a question. Please do type in the chat bar or in the questions bar so that I can see this. So because we are not using audio for this, so you'll have to type out your questions on the chat window or the questions window so that I can answer. So both Kunal and Lakshmi, please do. Okay. So as I don't see any further questions, I would probably pause my part here, and I hope to connect to you soon and be part of our next webinar. So Sujata will take the suggestion definitely, and we will try to see what could be best suited time. Okay. So we'll probably do also suggest Sujata or emails or so on whichever way. What do you think is a better time so that we can also connect a community poll for from this perspective. So thank you very much all for attending this session, and we will be sharing the recording of this webinar also shortly on our YouTube channel. And do feel free to get connected to us on LinkedIn as well as Facebook and many other channels that we are available on. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you had a good learning till we meet again. Thank you very much.